Hello, welcome to Talk Truth. My name is Corey Huntsberger. I have my dad, Alan Huntsberger, in the studio with me. Dad, we're going to start off with our foundational verse. I like to call it our land acknowledgement. Alan says it's a declaration. I say it's a land acknowledgement. Let's go for it. The earth and everything in it, the world and its inhabitants belong to the Lord, for he laid the foundation on the seas and established it on the rivers. Psalm 24, 1 and 2. We are all living on this planet together, so we all have to get along, right, Dad?
Yeah, we do. And you know, the interesting thing, when you look at that verse, something came to me the other day, and so I wrote it down. Nations do not collapse overnight. They drift. Drift is subtle. It begins when truth is slowly replaced with performance and authority is exchanged for popularity. No alarms sound, no announcements are made, but foundations quietly shift. Scripture shows us that when God's authority is ignored, confusion follows. Moral clarity erodes, justice becomes seductive. Identity becomes unstable. Truth does not drift. People drift away from truth. The enemy thrives in drift. He does not require open rebellion. Gradual forgetfulness is enough. And when a nation forgets who it answers to, something else always takes place: power, ideology, or fear. But drift is not irrelevant. Living in truth begins with awareness. We must recognize drift before correction is possible. God has not moved. Truth has not changed. The question is whether we are willing to return. Return always begins with humility. So today, as we choose to live in truth, let us walk under the Father's authority, trust his ways, and rest in what he is restoring.
That's good. I'm excited for our guest today, Alan. He's been on the show before, and he's back. It's Mr. Matt Landman. He is an activist and a filmmaker. And Matt, we're so excited to have you back. You've got your websites, frankenskies.com, which is like the movie that you did that we've shown on this show. And I know a lot of our viewers really appreciate it. Also, you've got actualactivists.com. You are very busy. You're all over the world, traveling, and you're doing all kinds of speaking engagements. And we're so excited that you could spend a little bit of your time here with us. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Alan and Corey. I appreciate you having me on. And for the Bible verse at the beginning, it really resonated with me, and it's important for people to acknowledge all that. So thank you.
Matt, why don't we start off with explaining a little bit about who you are and what you do? I mean, on this show, we have doctors, lawyers, scientists, and yes, everybody, we have activists on the show. We need activists in our lives. I know that sounds so crazy because there's so much negativity. The media does a lot of negativity with activists. But Matt, you're doing some really good work. Why don't you explain to people a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. So I like to tell people that I'm a normal person. I didn't come from money, or I wasn't raised an activist. A lot of people ask me, "Oh, your parents must have been activists." Not at all. I had a big awakening in around 2012, and come 2013-14, I was really waking up to geoengineering, chemtrails, aerosol deployments. And when I really sunk my teeth into what was going on, I started sounding the alarm. At that time, I had just gotten out of grad school. I got an MBA, Master's in Business Administration, with a focus in strategic sustainability. I graduated top of my class. I thought I was going to be working in finance, and I did for a little while work as a financial advisor and finance analyst and whatnot. But when I finally really wrapped my head around chemtrails, I decided that I was going to dive in and become an activist. So I ended up in Vancouver, Canada, actually, and that's where my activism career began in 2015. Around 13 and 14, I was out there doing presentations and passing out flyers, but I didn't get traction like I did in Vancouver, Canada. In 2015, I started on the movie Frankenskies, which I wanted to create something that was palpable, that you could share with anyone, that had the historical content, that could really open the eyes of the world to the ongoing lies in our skies. So Frankenskies was created in 2017, and I started hosting conferences, and I've been hosting protests and conferences and putting on different symposiums. I've been on about 1,000 podcasts now, and I'm working on the sequel, Frankenskies 2, Climate Chains. And I just held the largest ever geoengineering chemtrail protest on summer solstice in London, England, which had thousands of people come, and it was a worldwide event. And we even had other rallies in solidarity in other cities around the world at the same time. And we will be doing that every summer solstice, having simultaneous rallies around the world to raise the alarm on the geoengineering. I'm also a small business owner. I wear many hats as an activist, and one of them is raising awareness and protecting people from EMF radiation. So I have a silver clothing line where I have about 45 items protecting people, especially children and pregnant women, from EMF radiation with silver woven clothing. So that's a whole thing as well, and important for people to understand how the dots connect between EMF radiation, taking care of your health, and the geoengineering.
I just read an article that Secretary Kennedy is talking about the G5 towers and removing them away from population centers.
Amazing. In the country of France, there's much stricter regulations, and you can't have these 5G towers certain distances from preschools, schools, hospitals, and whatnot. The laws in the United States aren't as strict, and we've got 5G towers on top of hospitals, on top of schools, and there needs to be more scrutiny and regulation surrounding these things, because regarding EMF and cell towers, distance is your friend. There's this inverse square law that applies to light and sound. EMF radiation is basically light. It's light that we cannot see, but as we get further and further away, it exponentially decreases. Just like sound, like if you have a crying baby and you get 20 feet away, it's exponentially decreased as you get further away. It's called the inverse square law. It's important for people to understand that distance is your friend when it comes to cell towers and cell radiation, EMF radiation, and having a cell tower nearby can, over time especially, have health implications.
You know, the interesting thing is when you talk about moving, they have these towers at churches, and they approach the churches and saying, hey, this can be an extra revenue for you if you allow us to put up this tower. And so churches fell for that hook, line, and sinker, and they cover the, antennas with kind of a shell and put a cross on it, and it looks wonderful. But in the meantime, it's actually hurting the health of parishioners that come to that church.
Yeah, the telecom agencies will pay just about anybody that is willing to put a cell tower on their property, and they have concealments such as hiding them and disguising them as trees, as palm trees or conifers, or even cacti, as I know Corey knows in Arizona. But when they disguise them as crosses, that to me is just an abomination. I just don't agree with that one bit. Yeah.
Well, Matt, there's so much to talk about 5G and all that. I wanted to talk about more on this climate scenario. Now, I'm sure you hear this often, and all the 1,000 podcasts that you've been on or more. One of the hard things for people to digest is the word chemtrail. The minute you say chemtrail, everyone, thinks you're a kook, or, you lose them. But geoengineering seems to be a more digestible word for people because there's a lot of proof of geoengineering out there. Even the leaders, there's companies, they all talk about geoengineering. I want to ask you this about the word. Is it okay is chemtrail and geoengineering the same? Are they different? Can I replace the word chemtrail with the word geoengineering and still get my point across?
Well, you can. They're not necessarily synonymous.
Okay.
It really depends on who you're talking to. You like to meet. It's good as an activist to meet your audience where they're at, to plant the seed properly. You don't want to go up to your grandmother who's never heard the term and be down that rabbit hole of chemtrails, this and that. I mean, it goes all the way back to the JFK assassination when conspiracy theorist was termed. You know, we can't really use that word because it's been demonized so much. So I like to call us truthers. You know, we're truthers. We're out there looking for truth. The word chemtrails came from the Air Force. You know, it's a very government made word, but it's been also demonized. It makes people think that you're wearing a tinfoil hat, that you don't know what you're talking about. But the thing is, geoengineering is the purposeful deployment of atmospheric aerosols in the sky to dim the sun, alter the weather, manipulate weather patterns and what have you. But if you watch my film Frankenskies, frankenskies.com, available for free, please check it out. And it's important for people to share this film. In the movie Frankenskies, there's an expose of radioactive substances being sprayed over St. Louis to see the impact on children's lungs. There's also lithium sprayed on people to impact them in certain ways. So there's also biological warfare tested over San Francisco, which is now mainstream. You can look it up on Wikipedia. So it's not just weather modification or dimming the sun. There's also other agents that are sprayed that don't fall under the word geoengineering. But really, like if you're talking to someone who's going to be sensitive to the word, you know, you can say stratospheric aerosol injections or solar radiation management or all these other words that are similar, but they're not necessarily the same. But I get it all the time. Oh, how can you use the word chemtrails? It's not the same as geoengineering. It's like, okay, well, who am I speaking to? Who is my audience? But they're not one and the same. And it's important for people to grasp things like terbium is being sprayed in the atmosphere and it's showing up in rainwater analysis. Terbium is a very, very expensive rare earth mineral. It's mined in China. It is put into plasma television screens that are 3D. So it seems like terbium is being sprayed in the atmosphere to ionize it, to create a screen to have like holographic projections, what have you, in the sky. And we see that with these northern lights that don't look like northern lights that are all the way down in Florida and what have you. We've got different things going on for this perception management, programming, and what have you. So not everything is geoengineering, but feel comfortable using the word. If you're trying to wake people up, you know, you got, like I said, you got to meet them where they're at.
Can you tell me, like, when did it, because this is not new, but for people that this is new, that they're listening, when did geoengineering start? Because it's got a history.
Well, people that were keeping their eyes to the sky and activists and what have you, they started witnessing this big uptick in the atmospheric aerosol deployments in the mid-90s. The film Frankenskies starts off in the 1920s. The patents go back to the 1890s. So I encourage people to look up. You can find a list of patents online. It's available at my website, actualactivist.com, frankenskies.com, or you can just look, you can just Google list of patents proving geoengineering to be real. And it goes all the way back to the 1890s. So they've been tampering with cloud seeding. And then when we got to Vietnam, the US Air Force is flooding the Ho Chi Minh Trail over Project Popeye and making rain a weather weapon for war. So it's been happening ever since the 1890s, but especially people started really seeing these grid patterns, lines in the sky in the mid 90s. And prior to that, and I'm interviewing people for my film, prior to the mid 90s, these lines weren't as prevalent in the skies and people weren't really witnessing it like they do modern day.
My problem is, because now climate change is such a big thing, like the pressure's on us about climate change, but we're not the ones that did anything with the climate. They're the ones that have been messing around with the skies and everything like that. Like last year, the flood in Texas, the CEO of Rainmaker comes on all the news channels and he's basically saying it was such an eye-opening moment. And I don't know if you got to see it. I'm sure you did because it's your life. You know, explaining, oh yeah, this is what we do. We fly drones into these clouds to make them rain, you know, and all this kind. So he's explaining to everybody, and he's a young guy. I'm a CEO. The company's called Rainmaker. This is what happens. But no, you know, the flood in Texas that killed all those children and people, that wasn't us. You know what I mean? That, you know, What were your thoughts when you saw that moment happening in real time? Because it's a very rare glimpse. We get to hear these kind of conversations happening in real time on mainstream media. And here he is, trying to, not take the heat, that it wasn't them that caused the flood. But yes, it's what they do. They do mess around with the weather.
Yes, I definitely caught wind of that, and I was bombarded by it. There's no way I could miss it, even if I was like sleeping the whole time. Someone would have come and woke me up with the news article. When anything is in the mainstream, I question it. Even geoengineering is being normalized in the mainstream, and if you rewind 10 years ago, geoengineering was just a crazy conspiracy theory term, but now it's being pushed through the mainstream as a solution to global warming, climate change, and what have you. If you really look at the ongoing program, though, you can witness that there's a classic problem reaction solution paradigm that exists where droughts, heat waves, floods, all these different weather events are being created. And as these events are created, the mainstream media says, oh, look, there's climate change and global warming. We have to do something about it. Maybe we should dim your sun with solar geoengineering. They are creating the problem to then spoon feed us the solution as a good thing. But the solution is also the problem, geoengineering. They're using geoengineering to create the problem. And then they're saying, hey, this is your savior. This is your solution. You should sign off on this and be okay with this with taxpayer money. Regarding the CEO of Rainmaker, when that hit the mainstream, I really started asking myself some big questions. Are they normalizing weather engineering, weather warfare? Is this some sort of disclosure to the public, like saying, oh yeah, we can do this? Then it opens up this can of worms. Have they been doing it for a while? Are they going to do it some more? And are we going to hear this more and more? When they first talked about it mainstream in Dubai, that they were seeding clouds in Dubai and then they seeded them too much and it caused this flooding and what have you. This is old news, and the mainstream is acting like it's new news, new technology. I mean, the Air Force is flooding Vietnam in the 60s. The United Nations came together and every single country knew about it, and they had to vote unanimously to ban weather warfare because you never know what's going to happen upstream, downstream from that practice. But now it's under the realm of conspiracy. Are they social engineering? Are they programming people by disclosing this through the CEO of Rainmaker? I have my doubts, but one thing that did do is wake a lot of people up. Are they purposefully warming people up to more and having this, weather by design, and we can change the weather and you're welcome, and we're going to do this for your own good, and we're going to try to wrap our heads around this and tax you for it and then dim the sun because we can and what have you? Because it seems like they are trying to normalize geoengineering and warm people up to it being more commonplace. And as they do things like these fake northern lights that don't look anything like the normal northern lights, like a plasmified sky with colors in it is nothing like the northern lights that usually are out there. They have this kind of like this look to them where it's like they're moving in the sky, and these fabricated northern lights are not normal. So are they going to say that the sun is getting extreme and that there's going to be solar flares and that we need to dim the sun? Is this another problem reaction solution scenario that we're looking at, and they need to normalize cloud making, normalize weather engineering, geoengineering, so the public can accept this? I scratch my head, but definitely the powers that be do create these floods. The Texas floods surely had something to do with the weather influence that the seeding causes. And in the future, as they talk about it more, I'll be very suspicious.
Alan?
Well, it's not anything new. I mean, I knew about, them messing around with the weather way back in the 60s. When I was a kid on the farm, it was called hail suppression. And they would come to the farmers and want money to be put into the hail suppression so that when a hailstorm came, they could get airplanes up into the clouds, and they would spray this silver iodized whatever into the clouds that would soften the hail and was supposed to help. And of course, they, promoted it. I can remember when it would hail, we would go out and see if the hailstones were actually soft or whether they're hard. Most of the time, they were hard. I don't ever remember them being soft, but I know that hail was a problem. And they used that because my dad had been hailed out 10 years in a row. So to be hailed out 10 years in a row means you don't get any crops. And if it wasn't for the milk cows, we wouldn't have been able to put food on our table. But so did my father believe in getting those airplanes up there and trying to pour something into the clouds to make the hail soft? Yes, he did. But that's how they approached it way back in the 60s.
Wow. So all the way back in the 60s, it was a common knowledge that the weather was being engineered.
Yes.
Hail suppression, rain making in Vietnam. But then come the 80s and 90s, that information, that knowledge was suppressed. And now here we are, and they're acting like it's a brand new thing and that we can use it as our savior yet again. But if you look at the dynamic of the problem, reaction, solution scenario, and you start to wrap your head around the creation of storms, the creation of drought, and what kind of power that has in the narrative, then you can start to really see the writing on the wall and where they're going with it.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about the massive solar farm in California that was opened in 2014. And anyone who has driven by them, I mean, there are something to see for sure. And they've caused a lot of problems with birds and frying them and all that kind of stuff. It closed. It recently closed. Cost $2.2 billion to make. And basically they shut that whole thing down. What happened there, in your opinion, Matt? Did they mess it up from the geoengineering, blocking out the sun? And so here's a solar farm that's supposed to get energy from the sun, and they're blocking out the sun. Well, what does this mean? Because there used to be such a massive, energy, new energy kind of push. It's kind of still out there, but we're starting to see it crumble. We're starting to see people not wanting EV vehicles anymore, the demand dropping. And with the closure of this solar farm, I think it says something. I'm not sure what it says. What do you think?
Well, it's quite ironic and almost a big kick in the face to tell people that we have solar power from the sun and that that's green energy while simultaneously dimming the sun. I know people that have solar panels on their home, and when they spray, the solar panels are obviously not absorbing much sunlight at all, especially as they completely white out the sun and you end up with a haze over the sun. So if they're going to be dimming the sun publicly, which they're starting to announce that they're doing it publicly, even the UK government announced that in spring 2025 that they're going to launch and continue their sun dimming operations through solar geoengineering using aluminum, barium, strontium to dim the sun. Now, if they're going to be continuously doing that and also promoting solar power, it makes no sense. So likely the solar farm wasn't getting as much energy as they predicted, but also financial backing. I mean, you've got these very big industries. I mean, the Department of Energy is behind it. The different governments worldwide is behind it. The United Nations are behind it. How could you actually get funding continuously when there's a plan to limit the sunlight to the people? I think likely the solar panels weren't producing as much, but they're also looking into the future. How much does this thing cost to run? And when we cut sunlight in half, is this project going to be financially feasible? And likely they saw the books, the numbers, and the numbers weren't adding up. So they had to just ban that, they had to get over that project and walk away from it. But the absolute irony that still people are being told to put solar panels on their homes to be green, to edge away from fossil fuels. Meanwhile, there's multi-billion-dollar campaigns ongoing to dim the sunlight that's getting to the ground level, obviously impacting the solar panels. That in and of itself is very diabolical and needs to be exposed.
Agreed. But Matt, before we go, I wanted to give you a chance to your prediction. I'm calling it prediction of 2026. And you're noticing about the snowfall is not there. You're not getting the snow. We're in the middle of January now. There is no snow. What do you think that means for 2026? What do you think they're trying to do?
Well, they call it Agenda 2030 for a reason. The powers that be have come together in these think tanks, and they've put a big bullseye on that date, 2030. So by 2030, they want to have a lot of things in place. And how are they going to actually push people out of rural communities into 15-minute cities? That makes no sense. Like, yeah, they can drought people out and buy their farmland, but fires seem to be, and we've witnessed this in Lahaina and Palisades, Lytton, BC, we've witnessed it a lot. Jasper, Alberta, we've seen it all around the world now, how these fires play out. Come to find out, there's actually a thermite connection because the aluminum oxide is sprayed from the plains in the geoengineering campaign, and aluminum oxide plus iron oxide equals thermite. Iron oxide is prevalent in nature. So by spraying the aluminum oxide, it combines with the iron oxide, and you end up with these trees that are coated with a form of thermite, making them very flammable. So our forests are drought stricken. They can't absorb proper water because of the aluminum in their roots, in their systems. So you end up with these trees that are very flammable, and then you can engineer lightning storms. They've got patents to do that and what have you. It seems like the power grab, the land grab, the pushing people in the 50-minute cities and having these no-go zones, which that's part of Agenda 2030, these non-livable zones that are too fire prone. Sadly, I'm praying that this isn't true, but sadly, I think that fires are going to be a big problem in 2026. I see the writing on the wall, the elephant in the room. Where I live on this mountain where we have a ski resort, we have no snowpack, where traditionally this time of year we have a lot of snowpack. And I think that they're going to heat it up going into 2030 and be able to push their narrative, which is get people out of the country and into more controllable paradigms, which is more urban areas, 15-minute cities, what have you.
Yeah. Where's the CEO of Rainmaker when there's forest fires going on? They're not bringing any rain happening when that happens for sure. Matt, we're going to have you back. We got to still talk about Project Bluebeam. We're going to go also, I think, a little more into 5G. I think that's interesting as well. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your time.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
You want to help support our mission, keep this kind of conversation in truth on the air across our nation? We are viewer supported. You can go to our website, gotalktruth.com, click on donate, many different ways to give digitally that way. If you'd like to do it through the mail, you can. In Canada, you can send it to Talk Truth at 246 Stuart Green Southwest, Suite 3260, Calgary, Alberta, T3H3C8. In the United States, you can send it to Talk Truth at 4904 South Power Road, Suite 103-152, Mesa, Arizona, 85212. If you'd like prayer, you can call the numbers at the bottom of your screen. All right, Dad, we're out of time. We'll see you guys later.
Love you.